And what happened to that novel was that on the day of its publication, it kind of became September the 10th. It became the novel of the day before. And then the novel I wrote before this, 2 years, 8 months, and 28 nights, which, if you do the math, is 1001, was a New York novel, but it was a kind of fairy tale of New York. It was a sort of Arabian Nights story taking place in New York City with genies and flying urns, genies riding on flying urns. And when I finished it, I thought, I think I've taken this kind of writing as far as it can go and as far as I want to take it anyway. And I think there's not much more for me to do down this particular road. So I thought, do something else, do something opposite. And so this novel is, in a way, that in part the answer to that instruction to myself, which is, hold the flying carpets, never mind about the magic noses, 86 the genies. And to write a novel which was a different sort of a novel about New York, which is in many ways a kind of social panoramic novel. A novel to prepare for which I read books that I'm not often associated with, but books which had tried to do what I was going to try and do, which is to capture a moment of the history of the city and the country, like Edith Wharton's Age of Innocence, like James Baldwin's Another Country, novels like that. This is a novel about an evil old patriarch with 3 messed up sons, and there is a very famous novel about an evil old patriarch with 3 messed up sons. It's called The Brothers Karamazov, and so I thought I better, pay my respects to Dostoevsky by checking him out. And actually, tell you the truth, he wasn't much use, because Dostoevsky, what he's doing as a writer is so unlike what I was trying to do that apart from that echo in the shape of the book, there wasn't much that I gained from it. I mean, the writer that I did get a lot from, which I always get a lot from, is Charles Dickens. Because one of the things that I've always admired about Dickens and particularly tried to use in this book is the contrast between the background and the foreground in his books. So in the Dickensian background, the world of Charles Dickens, the city, the Dickensian city, is portrayed with minute, scrupulous, obsessive realism. Incredible social detail and naturalistic accuracy. And so the world of that world, the Dickensian city, lives in our imagination even today because it's created with such incredible attention to minute detail. And a thing that I've always admired about him is that he seems to be able to talk about the whole of society. He's not just talking about his own little patch. He can talk about aristocrats and murderers and debtors and swindlers and petty shopkeepers and anything that's happening in England in his time, he seems able to capture and put on the page. And that breadth of vision, I've tried to emulate it in various books, and certainly in this one. Get out of your comfort zone. I think there's actually something very important about writing, which is that there's a way in which the novel is like journalism. The novel is about reporting on the society. Stendhal once described the novel as a mirror walking down a road. And I think you do have to do that. You've got to go find out the story. You can't just assume you know everything. So, for example, in this novel, Nero Golden, this evil old patriarch, has been very involved with organized crime back in his original home country of Bombay, India, Bombay, the city of Bombay. Nero Golden, not his real name. But by the way, a man who calls himself Nero Golden is already telling you something about what he thinks about himself. This is not a modest man. Anyway, he has this evil past, and in order to create him, I had to find out a lot about the Bombay criminal mafias, which was actually extremely enjoyable. I began to feel like Mario Puzo, translated into Hindi. And then when he's in New York, he has these three sons who have different agonies, and one of them is brilliant but high-functioning autistic. One of them is very conflicted about gender transition or whether to do that or not. And one is just very nostalgic for home and doesn't like really the way in which he's been obliged to relocate. And that meant, I mean, I did start off with some knowledge of, I have some friends who are autistic. I have a couple of friends who have been involved in gender transitioning. So I had some like personal experience as a way of opening the door. But then I had to go find out a whole lot more. And I think it's great when you come out of a novel, at the end of a novel, feeling better informed than you were when you began writing it. And I hope that's also true about the reader, that the reader at the end of the novel feels a bit better informed than they were at the beginning. It used to be always said that one of the functions of the novel was to bring the news. And now, theoretically, that's not true, because there are so many other ways of getting information. But it seems to me that the more ways there are of getting information, the less information we have. I'm not even talking about the 45th president yet. But the internet is a place where garbage and truth coexists and seems to have more or less the same level of authority. And so it's actually, I think, very difficult for many of us to distinguish between those things. And I think one of the great beauties of the act of writing and reading novels in a time like this, in a time when reality and truth have become such disputed territory, is that one of the things that the novel has always been good at doing is, in a way, making a contract between the writer and the reader. As you read the book, you begin to form a joint agreement about the nature of reality. If you like the book, you say to yourself, yes, this is how it is. This is what we are like. This is how things are. And it's pleasing to the reader to be able to make that agreement about the nature of the real. And I think, we live in an age in which we really need to start making that agreement again. We need to find ways, and reading good books is one such way, of getting a grip once again on what reality is, and therefore, by the way, what it isn't. This is in some sense a private novel. It's a novel about this family with its traumas and difficulties. But of course, it takes place in New York City at this very moment. It does something which you're taught not to do, which is to write a novel about the exact moment in which the novel is taking place. You're told that you should have distance and perspective and all that, which, yes, you should. But I've not ever been very good at doing what I'm told to do. Yeah, thank you. And as I say, there are some of the very greatest novels which have tried to do this thing of capturing the moment in which the book is made. I mean, The Great Gatsby, The Bonfire of the Vanities. There's a whole string of these books. And I was rather proud to see that this book got compared to all of those. And I thought, if it's been compared to The Great Gatsby and The Bonfire of the Vanities and The Godfather, what book is that? What book could that possibly be? Well, apparently I've written it. So that was kind of enjoyable to think. But I did clearly, if you're trying to get to grips with how things are, it's a difficult moment, I think, and it's a dark moment for somebody of my persuasion. And so I came to think that the book was this family tragedy, or well, I mean, it has comic aspects, so maybe a tragic comedy. A family tragic comedy, but surrounded by the larger tragic comedy of America. And the words Donald Trump don't occur in the novel because I wasn't going to let him in. But there is at the background of the novel at one point, there is the question of the 2016 election is there. And it occurred to me that in In a deck of playing cards, there are only two cards that don't behave properly, and one of them is the trump and the other is the joker. And I thought, well, I don't want the trump, so I'll have the other one. So there is a character called the Joker with green hair who runs for president and wins. Batman nowhere to be seen, not in Age of Heroes. So there's that. So there's the context of the novel is not only political context. So I think if you're trying to write this kind of grabbing what used to be called the zeitgeist, you have to try and grab everything, whether it's people's obsession with cronuts, or Occupy Wall Street, or whatever. You have to try and let the book be elastic enough to let in what's going on at the time of its writing. So that was quite enjoyable to do. So yeah, it's a story within a story. It's the story of this family, broken family, inside the story of a broken country. And I think that's really the thing I wanted to emphasize, because actually, if the election had gone the other way, I wouldn't have had to change hardly anything, because it seems to me that in many ways that Trump is an effect, not a cause, and that the rift in America would have been there if Hillary had won. If Trump were somehow to dematerialize tomorrow, it will still be there. And so Renee, the young filmmaker who is the narrator of the novel, who investigates this mysterious family, he's also very anguished about his country, and that's what he's anguished about. He's anguished not so much about a particular candidate, but about this incredibly divided reality in which people can't agree even on a simple thing like what is the case. And that was the book that I wanted to write, this book about a private fracturing set inside a public fracturing. And then to make it funny. And I think I've got time. I'm going to read you just a little bit, because one of the most unexpected things about this book was a character that I had thought of as being a minor character. There's a certain point when Nero Golden comes to Miami. And he meets somebody there are no people like this in Miami. An extremely beautiful, very ambitious, gold-digging Russian girl. And you can see, completely fictitious. and she gets her hooks into him. And I just thought I'd read you a little bit about how she does that. But the most puzzling thing or surprising thing about this book is ever since it's come out and people have been reading it, people really like her. And people keep saying to me, that Russian girl, she's kind of cool. And I say, she's the most self-seeking, selfish, amoral character in the book. They say, yeah, but you kind of dig her. And so this is really a surprise to the author. So I'm just going to read you a little bit about her. You can decide what you think. I've got about 10 minutes, and then we'll have some questions. I'll just read you a few little passages. Here is Vasilisa, the Russian girl. She is striking. One might say she is astonishing. She has long dark hair. Her body is also long and exceptional. She runs marathons and is a fine gymnast, specializing in the ribbon element of rhythmic gymnastics. She says that in her youth she came close to the Russian Olympics team. She is 28 years old. Her youth was when she was 15. Vasilisa Arsenyeva is her full name. Her region of origin is Siberia, and she claims descent from the great explorer Vladimir Arseniev himself, who wrote many books about the region, including the one that became a Kurosawa film, Dersu Izala. But this line of descent is not confirmed because Vasilisa, as we will see, is a brilliant liar, accomplished in the arts of deceit. She decides she wants to come to America. She wants to go to America and be adored and send US dollars back to her family at home. This is what she has done. She has flown the coop. Here she is in America, in New York City, and now in Florida. And she is much admired and making money doing the work the beautiful do. Many men desire her, but she is not looking for a mere man. She wants a protector, a czar. Here is Vasilisa. She owns a magic doll. When as a child, an earlier Vasilisa was sent by her wicked stepmother to the home of Baba Yaga the witch, who ate children, who lived in the heart of the forest, it was the magic doll who helped her escape so that she could begin her search for her czar. So the story goes. But there are those who tell it differently, saying that Baba Yaga did eat Vasilisa, gobbled her up the way she gobbled up everyone. And when she did, the ugly old witch acquired all the young girl's beauty, that she became outwardly the spitting image of Vasilisa the Fair, though she remained sharp-toothed Baba Yaga on the inside. This is Vasilisa in Miami. She is blonde now. She is about to meet her czar. She's on Fisher Island. I mean, where else would she be? The Vanderbilt house is the heart of the island. Rewind. Here is William Sutton Vanderbilt II on his 250-foot yacht, making a swap deal with the developer Carl Fisher. The yacht in exchange for the island. Shake hands on that. Here is Bibi Rebozo, accused at the time of Watergate of being Nixon's bagman, joining a group that bought the island from the guy who bought the island from the guy who bought the island from Vanderbilt. The island has a history. It has an observatory. It has, as previously stated, peacocks. It has discretion. It has golf. It has class. And this cold holiday season at the Vanderbilt house, after the New Year's Eve dance on the fine parquet outdoor dance floor, laid down amid trees festooned with strings of light, and burning braziers and live music, and women in their jewels, and security guards guarding the jewels, and the men who bought the jewels admiring their property. The island also has a much talked about winter and spring, November and April love affair. My money for your beauty. Shake hands on that. Anyway, so she seduces him, right? Because what chance does he have? So after she seduces him, everything you want, she says, when you want it, it's yours. And on the third night, she discusses business. This is not a shock to him. This makes things easier. Business is his comfort zone. She produces a printed card the size of a postcard with boxes to tick. Let's go through the details, she says. Obviously, I should not stay in the house on McDougal Street. That is your family home for yourself and your sons, and I am not your wife, so I am not your family. So you can choose, A, a residence in the West Village for convenience, for ease of access, or B, on the Upper East Side for a little distance, a little more discretion. Very well, B, this is also my preference. So the size of the apartment, 2 bedrooms minimum, no? And maybe one more as art studio space. Good. And will I own it, or is it a rental? And if so, for how many years? Okay, think about it. We proceed to the car. And this I leave to you completely. A, Mercedes convertible. B, BMW 6 Series. C, Lexus SUV. Oh, A, so nice, I love you. The question arises of where I will have accounts. A, Bergdorf, B, Barney's, C, both of the above. Fendi, Gucci, Prada, this goes without saying. Equinox, Soho House, every house, you see the checklist. The subject of a monthly allowance. I must comport myself in a manner that befits you. You see the categories, 10, 15, 20. I recommend generosity. Yes, in thousands of dollars, darling. Perfect. You will not regret it. I will be perfect for you. I speak English, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Mandarin, and Russian. I ski, water ski, surf, run, and swim. The flexibility of my gymnastic youth, this I retain. In the coming days, I will know better how to satisfy you than you know yourself, and if equipment is needed to assist this, if a room must be constructed, a room for us, let us call it a playroom, I will make sure it is done immediately and with the greatest discretion. I will never look at another man. No other man will touch me, nor will I tolerate any inappropriate advances or remarks. You deserve and must have exclusivity, and it is yours, I swear to you. This is all for now. But there is one more matter for later. This is the matter of marriage, she says, lowering her voice to its huskiest and most alluring level. As your wife, I will have honor and standing. Only as your wife will I truly and fully have this. Until then, yes, I am happy. I am the happiest and most loyal of women, but my honor is important to me. You understand. Of course, you are the most understanding man I have ever met. So yeah, my unexpectedly popular villain just goes to show that sometimes people like bad girls better than good girls. Anyway, so there it is. It's this novel about New York and America now, with at the heart of it a mystery from across the world. And it's very interesting. It's the first time, really, I've written a book which contains, which could be described as something like a mystery. Because there's this dark secret. This family has arrived going to enormous lengths to change their identity, to conceal their past, etc. Why? And when, of course, to write such a book, I have to know the answer to why, and then, in a way, you have to construct the book backwards. You have to decide exactly when to drip little bits of information into the reader's ears. And sometimes it's disinformation. You know, there's deliberate misdirection. You know, look over there, where everything's happening over here. The president is good at this. But it was fun to write a mystery. And one of the non-writers who really helped me to do it, and this is the last thing I'll say before questions, is Alfred Hitchcock. I mean, strangely, the place in Greenwich Village where the novel is set, I discovered was about 100 yards away from what Hitchcock had in mind when he made Rear Window. And it has a kind of Rear Window feeling. The central setting is this private communal garden in the heart of the village, which actually exists, where the characters can enact their stories while being watched by everybody living all around them. And Hitchcock, of course, is the great master of suspense and misdirection and so on. And so it's a little bit Hitchcockian, this book. And eventually you find out what the secret is, and I hope you like it. Thank you. So, okay, so we've got 10 or 12 minutes for questions. So if you have some, the mic's over there, standing up in the middle of the aisle here, please go to it, and I will try and answer. Yeah.
Yes, I wanted to know if Balzac or Cortázar in the Book of Manuel had anything to do with the influence that you were talking about, because you didn't mention those two.
You're asking about Julio Cortázar?
And Balzac.
Ah, and who, sorry?
Balzac.
Oh, Balzac. Yes, I mean...
In terms of writing about the present moment.
I mean, you couldn't have named two more different writers in terms of their technique, but I mean, I'm a great admirer of Cortázar. You know, I think his novel Rayuela, Hopscotch, is one of the great novels. Yes, but that too. You know, yeah, but you know, Cortázar, yes, very cool. Balzac, I felt, was Balzac, Stendhal, that kind of French realist tradition, I think had a little bit more to do with this book than Cortázar, because the book isn't quite as, well, it's not magic realist for a start, you know, really. But I mean, for example, there's a wonderful moment in Balzac's novel Eugénie Grandet, the very beginning of the novel, which is almost like a cinematic zoom, where it starts off, he says, this is the city of Marseille, you know, baking in the sun, describes it. Then he says, in this city, there's this particular neighborhood, and this neighborhood is like this, it has this kind of people living in it, and so on and so on. In this neighborhood, here's this house, and this is what the house is like, and the house is obviously occupied by people of certain kind of wealth and elegance, etc. In that house, here's this room. Look what the room looks like. In the middle of the room, there's a chair, and on that chair, there's this woman. And her name is Eugénie Grandet. And by the time you get to her, you already know so much about her because of the way in which the book contextualizes her. I thought it was just a brilliant device, you know. And when you come across a brilliant device, the best thing you can do is steal it. I remember this once. William Faulkner was once accused of plagiarizing the technique of multiple narrators that he used in As I Lay Dying. And he gave this wonderful answer, which maybe only Faulkner could have given, where he said, when I am in the throes of my genius, he said, I take whatever I need from wherever I can find it. And I don't know any writer who would do differently. Now, I mean, he's right about the second part. I don't think many writers would refer to the throes of their genius. That's all. I think you have to be Faulkner to do that. Anyway, yes, sir.
Well, I don't have a prolific question like that one, but I did see you on Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I'd like to know, A, what it was like to work with Larry David. And since the show is totally improvised, did you come up with Fatwa Boys and Fatwa Sex?
Well, it is all improv. I mean, look, it was fun. I mean, I met him a couple of times just casually, and then he got in touch with me out of the blue and said that he had written this thing and I want to be in it. And I said, well, what thing is that? And could I see a script? And he said, well, that's difficult because there's no script. and I said, well, can you tell me something about it? He told me about 2 or 3 sentences. And I thought, okay, that sounds funny, I'll do it. And then I arrived, and there was a moment of thinking, how would it be if I'm the only person in Curb Your Enthusiasm who's no good? When you're surrounded by these brilliant comedians, you know, who are so good at improv. And they're very good at making you feel comfortable, I have to say. And it's not just improv, it's guided improv, you know. So you know in a given scene, you know that you're supposed to get from here to there. You know what's supposed to happen in the scene. But how you do it is up to you. There are certain lines that I am proud of. I think just comparing the fatwa to sexy pixie dust, that's my line. And there's actually a bit that's cut out, which if you go to the Curb Your Enthusiasm Facebook page, they have deleted scenes. And there's a deleted scene, I mean, I can see why they cut it, but it was fun, which is in between the 2 scenes that I was in. One is, the first scene, you know, is when he comes to visit me in my house, this unbelievable mansion with servants and so on. And then we go to this restaurant. Well, there was a scene when we're leaving the house to go to the restaurant. And as we're walking out, he says to me something like, so are there female butlers? And I say, yeah, I mean, yes, I think there are. There's a few. There's some female butlers, yes. And he says, because that would be better, like a female butler, because there'd always be the possibility of sex. and I say, no, Larry, that's you don't understand. There's a rule in the butlering world. And he says, what's the rule? And I said, the rule is don't fuck the butler. and that was my line. so anyway, you know, all I can say is it was two of the most enjoyable days I've had for a long time.
Thank you.
Hi. Speaking of fatwa, I was 6-year-old in Tehran when I heard Ayatollah Khomeini's fatwa against you being read on the national TV. And my mom told me, see, this is why you shouldn't criticize Islam. So fast forward 28 years, I'm an ex-Muslim now. I'm still being told by Americans and Canadians that I shouldn't criticize Islam, but this time in the name of diversity. So my question is, how do you see this dynamic between Islamic culture and Western culture play out itself, and what would you suggest to me and other ex-Muslims as the best approach to talk to the Westerners and Muslims to make some sort of a balance? It's an honor.
Look,
thank you very much.
Thank you. I think just say what you think. There's nothing else. You know, you can't second guess people. I mean, if you believe things to be true, you should say them. You know, I mean, Islam is not immune to criticism. No set of ideas is, just because they pay lip service to a non-existent sky god. I mean, I even hear myself the echo of my friend Christopher Hitchens saying that, but now that Christopher is no longer with us, I think I'm probably like one notch up in the line of most aggressive atheists.
Yeah, we need it.
So I don't see any reason per se to give religious ideas respect, and I just think you have to make a distinction between human beings and ideas. It's perfectly right that people should not be persecuted, and they should, and that racism should be called out, and it does exist, etc. That's fine, but that doesn't mean you have to pussyfoot around ideas if you think they're not right. If you think the world is flat, I have to be allowed to tell you you're an idiot. And then you have to be allowed to tell me why you think it's flat, because it looks flat. Then I'll tell you you're an idiot again. I mean, there has to be free play in the discussion of ideas, and that includes theological ideas. And you just have to distinguish between that and attacking human beings. They're different things, people and ideas. And they get blurred in this kind of conversation, and they need to be kept apart.
How do you see this?
I mean, look, it's a very long subject, and we don't have time, but that's as much as I can do for you right now.
Do you think ever there will be any kind of a balance between Islamic culture and a Western culture?
I have no idea. No sign of it yet.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Hi, Mr. Rushdie. My name is Prashant. I actually need some advice from you. I'm a screenwriter, and I was born and raised a Hindu, and I learned about Christianity back in 2006. So I started reading up on it, and I started to question it, and I wrote a comedy screenplay about if the story was told from a feminist Mary of Nazareth's point of view, where she's a career-driven person and refuses to calling from God. And I got a lot of pushback once it was finished. People are like, wait a minute, what have you written about? And I'm like, wait a minute, what have I written about? So as someone that's questioned religion and written about it, how did you handle it when the satanic verses came out and the pushback, and how did you overcome that?
Yeah, well, I would not recommend it.
I'm getting the same.
I mean, it was very difficult. I mean, a book you might be interested in, given what you've just said, is Mikhail Bulgakov's great novel, The Master and Margarita, which retells the story of Jesus from the point of view of Pontius Pilate. And it's very, very, I mean, that's only one of the narrative strands in the book, but it's a brilliant change of angle of the kind of thing you're talking about. Look, if you had asked me in 1989, this is what's going to happen to you in the next decade and how do you think you'll be at the end of it, I would probably not have backed myself to be in reasonably good shape. But you discover sometimes that you're more resilient than you thought you were. And I'm glad to be at this end of the story, because now it's a long time ago. I mean, look, the Satanic Verses was my 5th published book.
Right.
This is my 18th. So most of my life as a writer comes after it, and it feels like a long time ago, and I'm proud of it, and I'm really pleased that now that the fuss is less, that the book is finally being read just as a novel. It's being studied in colleges and so on, and then it has the life of a novel. Some people love it, some people hate it, and some people are somewhere in between, and that is the ordinary life of a book. And it's what it was denied for a very long time.
Right.
And so I'm glad that it can finally have that life worth fighting for, and there also was this small principle called free expression, which is worth fighting for, particularly in these times when we have an administration which is very keen on the Second Amendment, but not so keen on the First.
Correct. Thank you.
Thank you. I've only got 2 minutes, so let me try and answer.
This may require less because you touched on it, but regarding Christopher Hitchens, have you speculated much about what he might think about this day and age?
Who might think? Hitch.
Yes.
it's very difficult because Christopher hated the Clintons. Christopher's dislike of the Clintons was pathological, you know. So what would he have done? I don't know, because I mean, was far too smart to buy into, you know, Trumplandia. But I think he'd have been quite conflicted, you know. But, you know, I don't know, we need him, but we don't have him. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Salman Rushdie, for gracing us again at Miami Book Fair. Thank you very much. Mr. Rushdie will be signing his book on this floor on the other side of the elevators. If you'd like your book signed, please make your way that way. And we want to begin the next program right on time at 4 p.m. Thank you.
She reported on and took flack from the most captivating and volatile presidential candidate in American history at some rallies, including here in Miami at a memorable news conference, if you've read her book, in Doral, and later at a rally at Bayfront Park 6 days before the election last year, where he called her out by name and some in the crowd turned against her. Her book, Unbelievable, My Front Row Seat to the Craziest Campaign in American History, is her darkly comic, fascinatingly bizarre, and often scary story of how America sent a former reality show host to the White House. It's also the story of what it was like for Tur to be there as it happened, inside a no-rules world where reporters were spat on, demeaned, and discredited. Please welcome Tony DeCopel and Katie Tur.
Hello, hello. It is true, I am Mr. Katie Tur. And if anyone didn't get the joke, that is a reference to the fact that we are husband and wife, in addition to being colleagues in the world of journalism. Thank you.
I wanted a softball interview.
And it is of recent vintage, only 3 weeks old. And I will hope to avoid, which means there are no marital issues to work out here on stage yet. It's too new for that. I was hoping to get a sense from the audience of how many people here already have read the book and how many have not. How many have read the book? So we have a lot of curious, maybe on the fence buyers. So I think that's helpful because we can start with things that go to the beginning of this story, because the Donald Trump trajectory and the Katie Tur trajectory are entwined in a very fascinating way. And in the very same way that he is a political neophyte who made unexpected progress in his primary campaign and became president, Katie here was not a political reporter when all this began. So could you tell the nice people what it was that you were doing?
I reserve judgment on whether they're nice until after they buy the book. Buy the book. So I was a foreign correspondent for NBC News. I was living in London, and I just came back to New York for a couple days to remind my bosses that I exist because they have a tendency to forget you when you're overseas unless there's some major news happening, and it happened to be a slow period. And I showed up in the newsroom, and I'm standing around just chatting with one of my colleagues, and Donald Trump was making headlines. He had just announced that he was running for president, and in doing so said Mexico was sending rapists into the country. So Macy's dropped the Donald Trump brand from its stores. Univision said, we're not going to air your pageant any longer. NBC said, we're not going to air your pageant any longer either. And this was a ballooning story that needed to be covered, and they needed someone to cover it. But they're not going to put one of their political reporters on it because why would you put a political reporter on Donald Trump? I mean, he's a sideshow. He's going to be done in a few days. So they said, who's around to do this? And someone yelled out, Katie, she's just standing around, which I was. And I ended up covering one story, then two, then three. And by the third or fourth day, I got told that the president of NBC News wanted to assign me the campaign full time. And I freaked out. I thought a myriad of things. One, I was living overseas and I was not living in New York. Two, I have a vacation in Sicily in a week and a French boyfriend who I'm supposed to go on it with. I'm sorry, Tony. And oh my God, they don't take me seriously if they're going to put me on the Donald Trump campaign. They must think I'm a joke as well. But I called a friend of mine who had covered Mitt Romney in 2012, and he had been urging me to do a political campaign at least once because he said it was unlike anything else you will do. It's grueling, but it's fascinating. I called him, and he urged me to do it after he stopped laughing because it was Donald Trump. And so I said yes, and I was assured by my boss, one of my bosses, that it'll be 6 weeks tops. And then he said, and if he goes to the White House, you'll be White House correspondent. He starts laughing, steps into an elevator door, and the elevator door is shut.
The important thing to
it was cinematic in its moment.
And you know it's not an important assignment when the conversation takes place in a hallway as elevator doors shut.
Yeah, this wasn't a come to my office
Please
assignment.
sit down. In the beginning, Trump was having gatherings that would later become the spectacular, packed rallies that cable networks would carry in their entirety. But they were much, much smaller. And you were actually at, I think, the very first one, or one of the very first ones in New Hampshire. Could you talk a little bit about that, and in contrast to what most of us have seen later? And also, the interesting way in which Trump and you seem to be in a dynamic from the very beginning.
So the first rally that I went to was one of the first Donald Trump rallies, and this was around a backyard pool at a private home in New Hampshire. There was about a couple hundred people. Remember, at this time, nobody was taking his candidacy seriously. They thought that he was just trying to get some attention, and it was confusing because brands or companies were dropping him. Why was he trying to get all this negative attention? So the assumption was he wouldn't last to the debates, and even if he did, he would get laughed off stage, and he probably wouldn't want to release his financials since he's so notoriously secretive about his money. So at this backyard pool, where there were only a couple hundred people, it mostly was just people wondering what in the world Donald Trump was doing. I mean, he was on stage rambling. He had no coherent thread for why he was campaigning, except for I want to build a wall, and I believe that Mexico is sending rapists, and the media didn't caveat me with some are good people, and I get more standing ovations than anybody, and Katie Tur, you're not paying attention.
In the middle of all of it.
In the middle of all this, and I remember thinking, I presumed he wasn't even talking to me because I'd never met him, I'd never shared the same air as him. There was no reason in my mind for Donald Trump to know who I was, and my producer gave me a hard nudge because the entire place is looking at me as is Donald Trump, and I just yelled out, I'm tweeting what you're saying, which I was doing, and which he approved of because he said I was doing a good job, and then he moved on. But that became the dynamic between the two of us, and that was the very first day, him calling me out while he was on stage, either for work that he approved of or more often than not work that he disapproved of.
Why do you think he took a particular interest in you from the beginning?
I think I'll let you all have your assumption, but then I'll add this. Donald Trump wants to be taken seriously, and I was the very first network correspondent assigned to cover his campaign full time. And that is an honor when you're a presidential candidate. That means that a TV news network, a broadcast network, something with the legacy of NBC News, has decided to assign a reporter full time to you. So that means they're taking you seriously. So he must have seen me as somebody very early on that he wanted to charm into submission, somebody that he could rely on for favorable coverage. Also, remember, we're NBC News, and he has a long-standing relationship with NBC because we aired The Apprentice. And then there were large swaths of time before any other correspondents were assigned to cover him full-time. So I would go to cities across this country where I would be the only recognizable face in a room for Donald Trump. Other reporters that would come up to him for interviews were mostly local reporters, and he didn't know who they were. So we ended up engaging one-on-one quite a bit, and he came to pay much more attention to my reporting than he probably would have had I started the campaign in December or January when there were more correspondents.
So in the beginning, you stayed in the U.S. and you gave up an Italian vacation, a French boyfriend, a beautiful apartment in London, a job as a foreign correspondent, which holds a great deal of cachet, is exciting, involves a lot of airline miles, to follow Donald Trump, a person at that time virtually everybody in the political world considered to be a joke. Why would you give up so much to cover what appeared to be so little?
I'm still struggling to figure that out, and you know, Tony, because
I wasn't in the picture at that point either.
Every few weeks I look at you and I say, we really need to move back to London.
It's true.
I love that job. It was the dream job for me, a foreign correspondent, the pinnacle of my career. I mean, being a foreign correspondent for a legacy news network is an extremely coveted job. I mean, you get to travel the world, you get to meet people you would never get to meet, and you get to do it while somebody else pays for it. I mean, it's perfect.
But did you see something in the beginnings of Trump that made you think this is going to be worth it? Or this is going to be important?
Initially, it was a 6-week assignment, so I figured there was nothing to lose. And as it continued, he became, I guess, more captivating, fascinating. I mean, this was a roller coaster, and I wasn't about to, get off the ride. Nobody understood what he was trying to achieve or why so many people were so excited by him, and people are still trying to figure that out to this day. And I got to see it and try to understand it myself. And I wasn't going to say no to that. And also, being overseas, again, when it gets slow, you can tend to be forgotten. And there's a line in the book where, while I was very happy overseas, it's a quote, from another person saying, "Why be happy when you can be great?" And that's kind of what I was thinking in that moment. I have an opportunity to do something great, to make a mark, to see history unfold before my eyes. It's a cliche, but that's really what a lot of us get into the business to do, to watch history in the making. And Donald Trump, love him or hate him, was history in the making. He was upending every norm. He was defying political gravity. He was pissing people off, and he was exciting so many others.
But everybody thought that he was going to plummet after a certain point, after Iowa, after the fall. There were all these lines in the sand that the political prognosticators would say, after that point, it's a cliff for him. You, and I can attest to this because I worked for NBC and MSNBC while she was covering Trump, and
We met in the makeup room.
We met in the makeup room. You were a lone voice of skepticism against the political opinion that he was going to burn out and crash. Why were you so confident as a political neophyte on those calls, those morning editorial calls, to say something is happening here?
I wasn't confident. I mean, I started out with a bit of a pipsqueak voice.
What were you seeing? What were you seeing that made you think?
There was enthusiasm and there was devotion in a way that the other political candidates were not receiving. I mean, he went after John McCain. I mean, can you remember a time where an American politician, anybody, frankly, in the public eye, where they went after a veteran or a prisoner of war, an American war hero, and were able to not only get away with it, but to see their popularity rise? That is unheard of in American politics. You don't go after a veteran. You just do not do it, especially within the Republican Party. You don't do it. And Donald Trump did, and he got disinvited from a bunch of Republican events, but his poll numbers went up, and a few weeks later, when he went to Mobile, Alabama, 20,000 people showed up for him in Mobile, Alabama. He said it was 40,000. He was lying. It was 20,000.
The pointless lie.
He always lies about the numbers. If it could be 100,000 people, and he'll be like, there were 190,000 people there. He has to almost double it. But it goes to show you that there was something about Donald Trump that made whatever he said, even if it was terribly offensive, it didn't matter. People liked it. And I would get on the calls, and people who have been doing politics forever, who are well respected, who I respect very much to this day, and who've seen it all happen before, who know how things go, said, this is silly season. I mean, it's the summer, people aren't paying attention. By the time the fall rolls around, football will be back on TV. They won't want to watch a Donald Trump rally. Homeland will be on TV. They won't want to watch a Donald Trump rally. It's Christmas, no. People are going to they're going to be with their families. By January, they're going to get serious about politics. Donald Trump could never win. But these crowds that would show up to his events were still huge, and they were still so excited to see him.
So let's talk about that. Anybody in the room been to a Donald Trump rally? We got one person in the back, 2, 3. I would say fewer than 2% of the audience has been to a rally. So for the sake of the 98% of the people who've only seen it on TV, what is it like to be in the middle of a Donald Trump rally, and really the middle, caged in with the other journalists?
Well, first off, a lot of the time when you're watching a rally on television, something he'll say will sound very offensive, and you'll presume that the room is not with him. Oh, this is where he crossed the line. Maybe the cameras aren't picking up the audio in the room, or they're just focused on him, and you can't tell what's happening and how people are responding. And there were multiple instances of this where he would say something like, there was a crying baby, and I'm like, get the baby out of here. And he was clearly joking, but on TV it didn't really ring that way. Or if somebody tweeted something, it's not how it read. But he never lost any room that he was in, except for one time. He never lost any room that he was in, even when he was saying truly wild stuff. He was calling Ben Carson a serial liar and making some sort of comparison to a child molester in the process, and making fun of him for the belt and the stabbing. And it was unbelievable in the moment, even to the reporters. We were like, what in God's name? I caught myself. What in God's name is Donald Trump doing? I mean, can he get away with this? I remember calling the Today Show, and it was late at night, and saying, you've got to cover this in the morning. This is crazy. He did this and that and this, and people don't care. And they don't care. They like it. And these were Ben Carson supporters, too. They were people who were saying, I'm deciding between Donald Trump and Ben Carson. And people who were like the evangelicals in Iowa who really looked up to Ben Carson because he's a leader in the evangelical community. And Donald Trump was just eviscerating him and calling him names and calling him a liar. And we talked to them afterwards, and they were like, well, he's got a point. And so, he just defied all of the odds. So my point is, these rooms were always with him. And it wasn't just the Trump rallies. It was people that I would meet in diners, in gas stations, in airports, cab drivers. Cab drivers became my bellwether for how well Donald Trump was doing. And I could tell you cab drivers in New York City, cab drivers in Washington, D.C., cab drivers in Miami, cab drivers in... oh God, all the states. I'm blanking on the specific one. St. Louis, they generally, North Carolina, 9 times out of 10, were Donald Trump supporters.
So
all walks of life, too.
For those who don't know, Katie's book is a memoir. It is not an effort to tell a complete story of the inside workings of the Trump campaign or of the whole election. It is her perspective on all of it and what it was like to be her for 510 days on the Trump campaign. And because it is a memoir, I'd like to hear you talk a bit about how you thought about covering Donald Trump and how you dealt with the criticism his camp put on you and your colleagues, and whether any of the criticism of the media that the Trump campaign currently pursues and still pursues is fair.
I think you watch my TV show too much because you just asked me 7 questions in one.
Well, no, because
you committed the
I
ultimate
reject
sin.
the criticism. We're now a cable news show here. We're going to debate it.
Just ask the first question. Ask the first question.
Well,
how did I?
Do you think you covered Donald Trump fairly and accurately, and how did you think about that coverage?
I think I covered Donald Trump fairly and accurately. I think I was tough on Donald Trump day in and day out, and which is part of the reason why he kept calling me out on stage. I think he deserved tough coverage. I think anybody who runs for president deserves about as tough of coverage as you can give them because they are running to lead this country. And you want to be as thorough as you possibly can be, both on the Republican side and the Democratic side. Independent side, doesn't matter. That person needs to be fully vetted by the press, even if it makes you uncomfortable because it's your chosen candidate. So I think I did it fairly. And it was difficult because he would say things that were demonstrably untrue over and over and over again. And then there were times where he did get treated unfairly in a certain rally or from a certain perception, and we would have to go on TV and say, no, he really was joking, and let me tell you what was happening in the room, because it wasn't read well didn't read correctly on TV or online. But criticism of the media in general for the way that we cover Donald Trump. I do think that we need to look back at 2016 to figure out how to do 2020 and how to make sure we do it as well as we possibly can. I do think that involves not just coverage of the candidates and not just a good rinsing of their opinions, a good wash and rinse of their opinions and their policies and their behavior, but also covering the voters a little bit more. I think we could have done a better job talking to people every day, and not just talking to people, putting them on television every single day, and talking about the issues that they cared about in their communities, because all politics are local, and each community was voting based on what they wanted to change in their community, and that's why so many unlikely voters for Donald Trump came out on November 8th, in places where you expected a Democrat to win, places where Obama won twice. People who voted for President Obama twice ended up voting for Donald Trump because of economic issues. And they decided willfully to ignore all of the outrageous things he said and did because they were looking for the hope and change that they were promised the previous 8 years. They didn't see it happening in their communities. They didn't see their quality of life improve. And there was a feeling like Donald Trump might, despite all of his many issues, might be the person who can go in and shake the system up. There was a gamble that was done for a lot of people, and we need to, in 2020, ask those people if they think that their gamble paid off.
I covered Trump rallies on the outside, covering the voters who were going in, and there was a time when the outside of the rallies were so violent that riot police were routinely a part of the control, where fights would break out, where ugly, ugly things were yelled, and then on the inside, it sometimes seemed it was even worse. How safe did you feel in the middle of those crowds when Donald Trump himself was pointing and hissing in your direction by name?
You compartmentalize. You covered one rally, I think, on the inside, while I was hiding in Miami for a day.
Oh, there.
You compartmentalize. You tried not to let it get to you, and people would come up to the pen and scream obscenities at us day in and day out. They would call us names, call us liars, say that we should be harmed physically, spit on us. I mean, any sort of behavior you can imagine that happened towards the press. And there were times where we were all more guarded towards the end of the campaign than we would be, a little more on edge than we would be, because you just can't help it. But there were times where people really felt like their safety was on the line. There was a rally in New Orleans where protesters stopped the rally, and the crowd got really ugly, and someone was tripped or they were pushed or something, but it seemed like the whole crowd was about to tumble into the press pen, which is just this bicycle rack gated off area in the middle of the rally. So that was one moment. There was one moment there were a number of moments, but the one that comes to mind and I write about in the book was the Muslim Ban Day from December 12th, 2015. This was in South Carolina, Mount Pleasant, South Carolina, and we're in the belly of a World War II battleship. To give you an idea of what was happening at that time, a few weeks earlier, San Bernardino had happened, the terrorist attack in San Bernardino. And in response to it, President Obama gave a speech on terrorism to the country. And the following day, the following Monday, Donald Trump is not dominating the headlines because we're talking about President Obama and terrorism. And he comes out midday without any sort of warning, without any sort of heads up, and makes an announcement through a press release that says he wants to ban all Muslims from coming into the country. And we had interviewed people that were waiting to get into this rally to find out if they felt it was a good or bad idea. People presumed that this was just a bridge too far, that this was going to sink him. He couldn't possibly try to ban an entire religion of people from coming into the country. It's anti-American.
I don't want to interrupt the story, but I do want to have you mention where you were and what it's like when major news on the presidential level happens and your day goes sideways.
Well, we're in South Carolina, so you can imagine I'm enjoying a really good lunch. One of the, there were few and far between. So we were just coming back from lunch at a great place in South Carolina, stuffing ourselves with delicious fried food. And we went back to the hotel, Ali Vitali, my Donald Trump embed for NBC News. And if you get the book, you'll understand what that means. And we ran into another one of our colleagues who was on his computer, and the email from the campaign popped up on his computer 30 seconds before it came to our phones. And his face just turns white and his jaw drops. It's cartoonish, and he starts laughing in that uncomfortable way you laugh when you just can't believe something's in front of your eyes. And Ali and I looked at him and said, "What in the world are you looking at? Tell us." And he's like, look at your phones. And so we start furiously refreshing our email, and then this comes over. Donald J. Trump is announcing a ban on all Muslims. And no sooner did I have the phone in my hand and read it than my phone started ringing. It was MSNBC saying, "You got to go live."
She describes the phone as a shock collar in the book.
It kind of is. And if any of you were watching cable news for the campaign or MSNBC, you'll know that we were on TV constantly, every single hour on the hour. And this was one of those blessed days where I had a 3-hour break, so I actually could eat lunch. And my phone rings, and they said, you got to get on TV and walk us through this. And I'm like, I don't know anything about it. I mean, I just got it on my phone. I haven't had a chance to call the campaign. I got to call my sources. But that doesn't matter when you're in the world of 24/7 news coverage. They need you on TV immediately. They need you trying to explain even the unexplainable. And so I call in, and Kate Snow and I found this old tape. Kate Snow and I talk for 10, 15 minutes, trying to figure out what this statement means and how it might affect Donald Trump's campaign, or how might voters respond to it, or how might the Republican Party or the Democratic Party or the political establishment respond to it. We're tap dancing. And just coincidentally, MSNBC had come out with a poll that day that showed that Republican voters, the thing that they feared the most, their biggest fear, was being the victim of a terrorist attack. So there was that, and how is that going to sway Donald Trump supporters' opinions? Where has Donald Trump been before this? Why would he be doing this at this particular moment? Blah, blah, blah. So we rush to the venue, do these interviews with supporters outside, and then go inside to wait for Donald Trump to arrive. And people are angry. They're scared. As I mentioned, San Bernardino had just happened. And Donald Trump had been saying and was saying with this announcement that the Obama administration wasn't vetting people. They weren't vetting people who were coming into the country, and that's why these terrorist attacks are happening. They're going to happen more often. Muslims are building bombs in their living room. Their Muslim neighbors aren't telling the authorities about it. They are hiding them. And the media is complicit because the media isn't reporting on it. They are not reporting on the failures of the Obama administration. So the room was scared, the room was angry, and we couldn't find anybody who thought that this was a bad idea. The most we got was, I've got to think about it. On the other end of the spectrum, it was, what would be even better would be if we deport all Muslims.
And at the time that Donald Trump is making this announcement, he's also conducting a Twitter feud with you and another reporter.
Yeah, he was upset about tweets that I sent out, literally tweets that I sent out a few days earlier at a rally in Raleigh. Say that 10 times fast, a rally in Raleigh. There are funny points in the book. It's not just serious political stuff. There's some funny moments. Where a bunch of protesters got organized, and they kept interrupting his speech over and over and over again at like 5 to 10 minute intervals, enough to where he abruptly stopped talking and left the stage to shake hands with people. And I said this on Twitter, and he was furious about it. Hope Hicks sent an email saying, "Mr. Trump thought your tweets were disgraceful. Not nice. Best. Hope." And after she sent that email, he followed up by going online on his Twitter feed and tweeting out that I'm a liar and I'm dishonest and I should be fired, in a series of, I think, 5 tweets, something like that, 5 tweets. And so my Twitter feed is full of people calling me a liar and saying I'm disgusting and making fun of me and my family, and also death threats.
So when you're, and it jumps from the digital world to the real world in the belly of that battleship.
So we're in the belly of the battleship sorry, we're jumping around, hope you're following. As Donald Trump is getting on stage to make this announcement, this Muslim ban announcement, and it is, the atmosphere is tense. I mean, it's a tinderbox. You throw a match in and the whole place would light on fire. It is I don't want to say a scary room, but it's the kind of room where it's best to keep a low profile. So I'm like sitting on the platform where the cameras are. The cameras are all above. So I'm just kind of keeping my head down because he had called me out. I didn't want to be visible, or I didn't want to be as visible as I normally am standing in front of the camera. So Donald Trump takes the stage, and he starts with his poll numbers, as he always does, and before he gets to the Muslim ban, he starts talking about the media, and then he's saying what a lie it was, as if the room knew what he was talking about. What a lie it was from Katie Tur. She's back there, little Katie. And he's pointing. And I'm like sitting right here.
And the speech is live on every cable channel.
Yeah, because it's the Muslim ban day and everyone's trying to figure out what was going on, so it's live. And the entire room, thousands of people turn at once and start booing at me, screaming in person, saying the things that they were saying online, but saying them to my face. And it was nerve-wracking. My phone, again, starts going off like crazy. Not just people on Twitter, but my colleagues and my bosses. and my mom saying, "What in the world is happening?" Because she's watching it on television. Are you safe? Are you okay? I mean, she's concerned. But I turned my phone off. I put it down. I put it over here because I got a job to do. He's making a major announcement.
How do you keep doing that job when that kind of attention
Well,
is
so here's
being
how
directed
I've
on you?
learned at this point, because he had gone after me so many times, I'd learned at this point that in order to diffuse the situation, you smile and you wave. So I did that. I smiled and I waved at this angry crowd. And eventually they got bored of screaming at me and they turned around.
Were you personally angry at
No,
Donald Trump
in the moment,
himself
in the moment you just,
for
you let it-
endangering you in that way?
In the moment you let it go because you have a job to do, especially on that night. You let it go. You have a job to do. That's what I just kept doing. I'm not a part of the story. Let it go. I knew that that would make me a part of the story. I was frustrated by it. I didn't want to be a part of the story. I did not want Chris Matthews to ask me about it on TV 2 seconds later, which he did.
Although it is true that she kept, the stories in the book are not stories that were told live on MSNBC. You saved all of them and put them in this volume. And before we go to questions from the audience, and speaking of doing your job, I love the fact that you were one of the first people in America to know about the Access Hollywood tape. The grab them by the P tape.
So much more interesting today, isn't it, than it was even a year ago?
It's a fascinating chapter in your story, and I love the journalistic process of having to get comment from the Trump campaign. So when you're a journalist, you find something out, and then you go to the person who is relevant to what you found out, and you say, "What do you think about this?" But it's a little different when it's the Access Hollywood tape.
Let's give a slightly more direct book plug. Yes, this book is about the campaign, which many of you all followed and saw. But what you get from it is a behind-the-scenes look, pull back the curtain to see what it's like to be a correspondent on the campaign trail, what your lives are like, what the campaign was like behind the scenes, how did they treat reporters, what are the things they said that may have been appropriate or not, and then in these weird history-making moments, what is it like to have to put something like that on television? And this was odd, because this is a tape that, with language that you can't put on TV, of a presidential candidate bragging, it seems, about being able to assault women. And they let you do it because you're a star. And so I see the tape, I exclaim loudly in the executive office where I'm being shown it. Oh my God, did Donald Trump just say you can grab them by the... But I said the word in the moment. And my boss looks at me and she's like, yes, he did. We need the campaign to comment on it, and we're going to put it on TV right after you get that comment. So get a comment, write a script, and let's get it on television. And so I email Hope and Jason, and the email is Hope Hicks and Jason Miller, who are the communications team on the Trump campaign. And the email, word for word, is in the book. And it's something like, Mr. Trump said you can grab them by the, and he also talked about effing a married woman, and word for word the things he said. Do you have a comment? They did not respond. But then I have to figure out how to put all these rated R things into PG-13 format for daytime cable news TV. And so I think I said grab them by the P were sexual advances, which is totally not fair to sexual advances. And I mean, it's fascinating looking back at it now, because it seemed like if anything was going to break this campaign, this was going to break the campaign. The whole place went silent, dark. Kellyanne Conway canceled her TV appearances, which at the time was unheard of. But yeah, it's interesting to look back on it now, especially considering what's happening in the Me Too campaign and how the president's weighing in on Al Franken and talking about a tape, but completely ignoring the fact that he has his own. Anyway, questions?
There are microphones in the center, and we can cease and desist with my questions and get to yours.
But we should keep them, since we don't have a lot of time, to questions, not statements.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
First question is, how would you rate the job that the gentleman who interviewed you had done? Was he tough enough?
I think it could have been a bit tougher, to be honest.
And the second question is, most of Donald Trump's policies adversely affect the people who voted for him. Do you think that those people will maybe by the next election come to the realization that they voted for someone that's doing them in?
I don't know. You're right. Some of the policies that he's spoken about or enacted, some of the deregulations or the rollback of regulations could potentially affect them in a negative way when it comes to just EPA standards. The gutting of Obamacare is going to affect a lot of people. This tax plan could potentially raise the taxes of the lower class and middle class down the line. That might not happen, though, until after the next election cycle for those rollbacks to cease. We don't have that full bill voted on yet, so it could change. I don't know. I mean, it depends on job creation. Do they have jobs? Is the job better than the job they had before? Do they want to continue giving him 4 more years for another chance to try and push things through? I don't know. Depends.
I wanted to thank you for being here. I admired your coverage, and hope you keep at it. And I wanted to ask, how in the world do you put up with these comments from the other side when you offer them to try to give a balance, and you know it's nonsense? And
Well,
how can you do any better? How can the networks do any better in the future?
Well, I have to reject the premise. The other side
okay.
is not. Here's the thing about reporters and journalists, and it's a good reminder. We're not out to convince anybody how to vote. It's not our job to convince Trump voters not to vote for Trump again. It's not our job to convince Democrats to vote for Democrats. It's our job to give you all the information that is out there, to fact check where we need to fact check, to contextualize where we need to contextualize, to give you everything you need to make the decision that you want to make. So when people come on my show and they don't have the facts behind them, I try to push back regardless of whether or not they're a Democrat or a Republican. It's tough right now, though, because there's a lot of people feel like they have a lot of license to just say fake news when they decide they don't like something or there's a fact that they don't like. And that's really problematic because it allows people to just decide that anything they don't want to hear, they don't have to hear and they don't have to believe. And that is going to, I think, negatively affect all of us in the future. So my plea to all of you, and thank you for asking this because I can give my plea, is to do your best to police your Facebook feeds, your Twitter feeds, whatever social media you use, and to be very critical when you look at certain articles and make sure that you're getting accurate information and you aren't just reading the things that you want to hear, and that you do take a moment to hear the other side as well and have conversations with people. Maybe they didn't vote the same way you did, but I think it's better to understand everyone and come to a place where we can talk again and accept a shared set of facts again so we can make better decisions or good decisions in the future.
If you don't disagree with something in your news feed, you're doing it wrong. Watching the news should be an experience of dissonance, not consonance.
It shouldn't be comfortable. Thank you.
Sometimes I watch the daily press meetings with Sarah, and I'm wondering, I just want to get up and strangle her. So I'd like to know how you guys don't get up and strangle her.
Well, first of all, we'd get arrested, and
that's a good reason.
One of the reasons. The White House, it's always been that podium has always been a place where a press secretary will try and spin the news in their favor. That's just the way things are done. This is, I think, taking it to a absurd degree. There are times where questions aren't answered, or they're just either she says I'll get back to you and she never gets back to you, or she just makes it about the Democrats suddenly, even though you're asking about Donald Trump or the Republicans, or she's denying things that he has said. So yeah, it's extraordinarily frustrating. I wonder how valuable those briefings are, personally.
Thank you. We're
You're
in the
welcome.
same boat then.
What?
We're in the same boat.
I think every time somebody spins, it's not great for anybody.
I believe the no spin zone is available as a slogan.
Hi, so I'm a journalist student, and I read your book when it first came out, and you mentioned that you never had a background in political journalism, that you started out as a weather girl, and that kind of helped you cover Donald Trump better because you didn't have that background in DC punditry. But how do you feel that whole, swamp sort of affected the coverage of Donald Trump and why people didn't expect his victory?
I worked for the Weather Channel. I chased tornadoes. I was never actually allowed to do the weather because I don't understand the meteorology. I'm not a meteorologist. But I covered the news with the weather, and before that I was a local news reporter for a long time, and then obviously a foreign correspondent. I think that it was beneficial going to 2016 because I was able to see with fresh eyes the campaign and the support that he was getting and the enthusiasm he received without all the baggage of, oh, these are the way things have always been done and he can't possibly survive this because so-and-so didn't survive this. So I thought it was really beneficial. I think that is partially what happened during 2016, and some of my most revered colleagues who are political people who do live in D.C. Have admitted as such, saying, part of the reason we didn't see Donald Trump coming is because we just believed everything, all of our hype, everything that we had seen come before in Washington, and how important it is to get out there and be on the road and not just rely on polls, actually talk to people and see something, smell something, feel something, be inside those rallies and get a sense of the momentum and the movement. So that's also part of the reason why I didn't go to DC myself. There was a few things. He was one of them. But one of the other ones was that I think it's better to talk about it from the outside and to try and maintain the fresh eyes I had in 2016.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, congratulations on your wedding.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Marcia Reisman, and it's a pleasure to meet you. I've been watching you since you started, and it's really fun to see you in person. You've developed into a really wonderful news reporter. It's very good. Go back to Sunday, November 6th. That morning on all the news stations, everyone was reporting that it was Hillary's to lose. Hillary, that's interesting. It was Hillary's to lose, and the percentages of her winning were across the board 60, 70, 80, all the way up to one ABC reporter who said 98%. What happened?
I should watch NBC.
What happened?
What happened? I mean, I think she wrote a book called What Happened.
It doesn't tell enough.
The polls were wrong. They weren't totally wrong. They just were wrong enough to lose, or not lose the election, but miscall the election. I believe it was November 6th. It might have been the day before that James Comey came out and said the second investigation into her emails was done.
That's true, yeah.
I was talking to a senior Clinton aide who said that they felt that was the worst thing that could have happened because it brought the emails, not the reopening, which they didn't like either, but then the closing, because instead of bringing closure to that, it brought it back up again, and it made people remember it. And if there was, the Access Hollywood tape was really bad for Trump, really, 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 really bad for Trump. And the only thing that kind of got him out of that hole after 50 former and current Republican lawmakers were saying either drop out or I won't vote for you was the reopening of the emails. And what that did, and I'm not saying that that was the nail in the coffin for Clinton. But what that did was it enabled moderate Republicans or Republicans who were on the fence or Republicans who did not want to vote for Donald Trump to say, I'm going to vote for him because I can't vote for somebody who might be under federal investigation. Which is ironic. But we didn't know at the time that Donald Trump was under investigation because the FBI didn't inform anybody. And there's questions about what's the double standard for there. So the polls were wrong just enough, and I think that, there's a bunch of failings. The Clinton campaign didn't go to Michigan when they probably should have gone to Michigan. They didn't make sure that their blue wall was going to stand. The Comey investigation didn't help. What was going on with Russia, we still don't know. I think we're still a bit away from figuring out exactly what happened on November 8th and why Donald Trump ultimately won. But you can't discount the enthusiasm that he had. I mean, people just loved him.
Yeah.
The ones that did.
Unbelievable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. I'm so sorry because this conversation is absolutely very engaging and inspiring.
Thank you for coming.
Thank
you all for
to
coming.
Katie Chur.
Thank you, Katie,
and also
for
to
doing
Mr.
this.
Thank you,
Bilzicott.
Tony.
Thank
Please
you.
buy the book. Please buy the book.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much. And you can see Mr. outside on the other side of the elevators for autographing of her book. Thank you. Silence your devices. Those that are coming in, please take a seat. And I'm going to bring on Mr. Bob Weisberg, and he's a longtime civil rights attorney, and he will make the formal introductions. Thank you. Bob?
Thank you. I have to say it's a real honor for me to make these introductions. Rudabeh Shabazi anchors the weekday evening newscasts on WFOR TV, CBS 4 in Miami. She also anchors the public affairs show Focus on South Florida, which airs on WBFS MTV 33. She joined CBS 4 in August 2015 as a morning anchor and became the main anchor along with Rick Fulbaum in September of 2015. Rudabeh was part of the team that won an Emmy for coverage of the Pulse nightclub mass shooting attack and was nominated for an Emmy for her coverage from Havana when President Obama made his historic visit to Cuba. Before joining CBS 4, Rudabeh worked at television stations in LA and Phoenix, where she also received an Emmy and Emmy nominations. Rudabeh graduated from Pepperdine University, where she studied journalism and sociology and received a master's degree from University of California, Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism. I suspect that most of you in this room, like me, were first introduced to Khizr Khan a little after 9 p.m. Eastern Time on July 28th, 2016, when Khizr, with his wife Ghazala standing beside him, Muslim American citizens, and parents of U.S. Army Captain Humayun Khan, who was tragically killed in Iraq in 2004, electrified millions of people around the world on the final day of the Democratic Convention, when he passionately spoke of American ideals and values and offered to lend Donald Trump his own much-read and dog-eared pocket constitution. Khizr was born the eldest of 10 children in rural Pakistan. He and his family moved to the United States in 1980, where they became American citizens and raised 3 sons. Kazir holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Punjab, an LLB from Punjab University Law College, and an LLM from Harvard Law School. Kazir's book, An American Family, a Memoir of Hope and Sacrifice, takes you on his life's journey from Pakistan, through schooling in Pakistan, through the United States, through the convention, and after. It was a joy to read, and I believe after you read it, you'd agree with me that it should be required reading in civics classes throughout the United States. As described in the book, after his stirring speech at the Democratic National Convention, Kizir and Ghazala received hundreds of letters from inspired people throughout the US and the world, offering condolences and thanking them for their strength and courage. And I want to read a passage from one of those letters and a little description of it. And this is from a woman, and this came a week after the convention, from a woman in Oregon, reference to Mr. and Mrs. Khan in Charlottesville, Virginia. And it's summarized in the book. She offers her condolences and writes that she believes Humayun must be proud of us for speaking out. She thanks them for their courage and for exercising rights guaranteed to all Americans in the First Amendment to the Constitution. And she then writes, and I think this really captures the essence of what Kazir's presence that night meant to this woman as well as millions of people around the world. And I'm reading this quote from the letter. "It has been such a sight to behold, and you have made me very proud as an American. I am disabled and unable to travel by airplane. I will never be able to see the Statue of Liberty or Ellis Island, but that is okay now because I have seen the parents of Captain Humayun Khan in action, and I have seen Lady Liberty quite alive." Thank you. Please join me in welcoming Rudabeh Shavai and Kizir Khan to the Miami Book Fair.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for being here. Welcome to Miami.
Thank you.
Such an honor.
Thank you very much.
So I first want to start with the most important aspect of this entire story, which is your son, the Honorable Captain Humayun Khan. And I want you to tell us what you want people to remember about him and his legacy.
Well, he was best of America. He was made in right here. We brought him 2 years old to this nation, to this country, and the rest, all he learned from here, service to others, standing up for fairness. He was made in right here, made of the values and the goodness of this country. I didn't know, recently I was at an event in Washington, D.C. A lady approached me and she said, "Mr. Khan, you don't know me, but Captain Humayun Khan was my commandant in Iraq. He found out that I cry every day because I was so afraid. He made a point, as long as he was there, he would come to me every evening before I went to bed, and he would assure me that, don't worry, I am with you, I am here to protect you." That is what we know of Captain Humayun Khan. I pay tribute to, if there are veterans in the audience here or by the reach of my voice, because of your service, your family's service, of all of our veterans, members of the armed forces, members of our law enforcement and their families. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for your honorable service to this nation, for keeping us safe and for keeping us free. We are grateful. Captain Humayun Khan was a soldier's soldier. He took an oath to defend the Constitution, to protect those that were under his responsibility, and he was so true to his word to the last moment of his life. And we did not make him that. And that is what the stories we tell in the book, that he was made right here. He was made in this country. He was made in this nation. He was avid reader of Thomas Jefferson, meaning service to nation, service to our country, standing up for fairness. That was his motto. And the rest is history. You all know him. He's as much as your son as he's ours. He belongs to America. He represented America so well, taught us, even to your own peril, you stand up for fairness. And he has left us with amazing light and grace that we continue to cherish even today. If you ask Ghazala about Humayun, she would say this, that we were blessed to have him for 27 years. And he left us with the candle from which others are lighting their candle, of serving others, of standing with others, those who are vulnerable. He stood with them. He was in fifth grade, we received a call from his principal, please come to the principal's office. And Mrs. Khan rushed. She thought that something bad has happened. Principal had a boy and a girl and Humayun and his teacher in his office, and he saw the worried look on Mrs. Khan's face and said, don't worry, there is nothing wrong. There is something good I want to tell you, that Humayun, he's in fifth grade. Humayun saw how this boy was bullying this girl in the classroom, and Humayun saw it second day. And second day, Humayun stood up to this boy and told him that you will not bully her anymore. That was fifth grade Humayun. So that's how we know him. And thank you. Thank you.
And there were critics who said ugly things about your appearance at the DNC. They said that you perhaps were politicizing your son's death. What would you say to that?
Well, yes, we are politicizing. There comes a time in a person's life, knowing Captain Humayun Khan's values, he would be proud of us, what we have done, why we have done. After that bigoted statement, and we narrate all this in the book in great detail. After the bigoted statement, I will ban all Muslims, all Hispanics will be thrown out of here, they are criminals. Women deserve no equal respect, and judges are partial. Small children of our neighborhood, our children's children, our grandchildren's classmates, our children's friends and their children would approach to me that you are a lawyer. Is this true? If this person becomes president, will we be thrown out of here? We are afraid. And I would hearten them, I would hug them and tell them, no, we are a country of laws, we are country of constitution, equal protection, equal dignity, rule of law. But nothing would hearten them. They would not eat well, they would not pay attention to their homework. Some of the parents called me and said, you have to speak to them again. Because they refuse to go to school. Every morning they have tummy ache, they don't want to go to school. And when we ask them why you don't want to go to school, they say that our friends are telling us in school that when you go back from school, your parents would have been taken. You will never see them again. So we don't want to go to school. This was happening in our personal life. And then came the invitation to come and speak. We were reluctant. We didn't want to go. We sat for 2 days pondering, should we go, shouldn't we go? We are humble, private, modest people, non-political totally. But that was on our mind when the invitation came, and when that card came from a middle school, 4 children wrote to us, and they placed it in our mailbox because there was no stamp on that envelope. And this is what that card said. One line that has taken us in the spirit of Captain Humayun Khan: care for others. Even to your own peril, you must care. You must stand for fairness. It is that card, that one line that sent us that day. We had almost decided we will not go because our well-wishers, our other children have said, do not go, this is not your cup of tea. This is what that line said: Mr. Khan, would you make sure that Maria is not thrown out of this country? We love her. She's our friend. And I read that card twice. We are people of faith. We had been praying for 2 days that some guidance should come our way so that we can decide, so we don't regret, should we have gone, should we have not gone. I brought that card to Wazala immediately. She looked at it, and her eyes welled. She looked at me and she said, please call them. We will go. We will go on behalf of these children. So when they see that, they would be heartened. They would be encouraged that somebody is speaking on their behalf. So those who say this, that we are politicizing Captain Humayun Khan, of course we are. We are politicizing for fairness. We are politicizing his life, his sacrifice for the well-being of our children. We are so proud. If he was alive today, he would be standing right here. This is how we greeted one another, left side to left side, because that's where hearts are. And he would always encourage us. And so it is a tribute to his life. The proceeds of this book that we have published, rather there are 2 now, one for our middle school children. This is our Constitution. And the other book, the proceeds of this book, both of these books are dedicated to the scholarship that we have set up in University of Virginia. It is titled Captain Humayun Khan Memorial Scholarship on need-based in perpetuity. The students will continue to benefit. So the good life that he had lived, he blessed us for 27 years, and his legacy. Yes, we are politicizing. Yes, we are doing this so loudly, so clearly, so that others that are still walking middle of the road would decide that this is the time for all of us to stand for fairness.
And Mr. Khan, you've had a very long relationship with the American Constitution. You write about studying it and admiring it when you were young in Pakistan, memorizing it. Do you have it with you right now?
Yes, I do. I'll bring out. I'll bring out for the purpose that I carry this in a minute. But yes, my love affair with the United States Constitution, Bill of Rights, most importantly, Declaration of Independence, started in 1972. Those who criticize that why am I so passionate about this? My passion for this blessed document and the values, at that time when I read it first, when I read the Declaration of Independence first, I could not dream, I did not have the caliber or the courage to think that one day I'll be able to go and sit among the blessed people that are born and are raised under these values and the goodness that is enshrined in these documents. Twice in my life, why I am so passionate about the values of Constitution, Bill of Rights, the dignities, and the rule of law that is enshrined in our articles, is this. Twice in my life I have lived without any dignity under martial law, under authoritarian regimes. You can draw the conclusions. I will simply point out that twice I have lived under authoritarian dictators, military dictators in Pakistan. Once when I was middle school student. Second, when I was law student. I could not get out of my home unless the military dictator gave us the permission, you can come out of your house. I could not read the newspaper because newspapers were the enemy of the dictator. They were the enemy of the free press, was the enemy of the authoritarian dictator of the country. Burn all the presses, shoot all the reporters. If they don't behave, kill them. I have seen with my own eyes how press was mistreated. The fourth pillar of our democracy, how it was maligned and mistreated. I have seen how judges were declared their incompetence. They don't decide the cases. I will decide. I am the dictator. I am the ruler. I am the custodian of the justice for this nation. I will decide myself. These are the two traits of authoritarians. One is they do not like free press. Free press is their enemy. It's fake media. You draw the conclusions. Judges are partial. They are no good. We will see you in the court. When you go to the court, we will see you in the court again. It is those traits that I grew up. When I read the Declaration of Independence first time, I was in awe that is there a nation on this planet that declares its independence? What a courage they have. Normally, I also come from the background was in subcontinent that you gain your independence by when the king or the ruler feels benevolent, he will declare you free. You appeal for it, you struggle for it and all, but there had never been a nation, and I challenge to most Americans today that read your documents, read your founding documents, you will come out in awe of the founding values of this country. This country declared its independence. We are free henceforth, and declared the grievances. I read all 1,338 words of declaration in one standing. My feet were hurting. I took my shoes off and I read them. I did not understand the full impact of it then in the first reading, but I read it. Then I read the articles that describe our rule of law, how the judicial system would work, how the judges will be appointed, the relation between state and the federal government. Oh, so that is how civilized people live. Then I read the best part of the Constitution, our Bill of Rights. I still remain, I did this exercise a few years ago out of curiosity. I decided to read the most of this world's constitutions, of the countries that have constitution. There is no nation on this earth, and I implore you to do that exercise, which declares in its constitution, the very first amendment, which says the first 5 words. I implore you to look at the spirit of those first 5 words. Congress shall make no laws. The Congress is the supreme body of this nation, has the full authority to decide and declare whatever laws should be enacted or rescinded. But Congress is being prohibited from touching those liberties under First Amendment and the rest under our Bill of Rights. No other constitution of the world, generally the constitutions say Congress have the right to do this, or Parliament has the authority to do this, or legislate whatever it deems appropriate, except United States. It prohibits, because those values that are enshrined, especially I give example of the First Amendment, and the very first value that is enshrined, you draw the conclusion and connect the dots, is the freedom of the press. It is so fundamental to the United States liberty, its democracy, its rule of law. Freedom of religion, whether you practice or you don't practice any religion, but you shall not be discriminated based on that. It is those values that have made us beacon of hope for the rest of the world. And it is for such reasons I am so passionate. 168 speaking engagements. Thank you. Thank you. 168 speaking engagements, and I shall continue as long as it takes to remind the entire nation of the goodness of this country, of the values that are enshrined in our documents, the basic foundations of our democracy, our rule of law. And I am so heartened when I see the fear, when I see the concern in the hearts and minds of communities throughout the nation, because when there is so much concern, when there is so much realization that we have taken a wrong turn, that soon thereafter, immediately thereafter is the correction. I am so hopeful. I give you, you will say, give us an example. I give you an example. I come from Virginia, from Charlottesville, Virginia. You saw the results. You saw the result last Tuesday. We took the turn for the right, and this nation will take the turn for the right. It is that gives us hope that regardless of Russian collaborator entered into the White House, we will correct, we will take our democracy back, we will take the dignity of our electoral system back, and this nation, because it is founded on the goodness, on the pluralism, on giving every citizen of this nation equal dignity, equal right, we will move forward with that spirit, that founding spirit of this nation. Should we be concerned about our safety, our security of our borders, of our nation? Yes, we all are responsible for our security, but unfair treatment of vulnerable communities, that is a defeated mentality. This nation will never stand for that.
Let's talk about then candidate Trump, who called for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims in this country until we can figure out what the hell is going on. His words, not mine. Let's talk about those words. A reporter called you the next day and asked for your reaction, and your reaction was, Americans are good and decent people, and this will never happen. Has your view changed?
No, my stand and my belief is further confirmed. We are concerned about our safety, yes, and I am for that. Very strong immigration. We don't have immigration policy, we have immigration law, and I'll explain in a second the difference between policy and laws. But we must protect our borders, we must protect our nations. Those with malintention, with malice in their mind and their heart should never be allowed to enter the United States. But that doesn't mean that we begin to violate our Constitution. We begin to issue executive orders that are in violation of the Constitution. I believe in the statements and the declaration of the national security advisors, those who have given their life and those who have spent all of their life protecting this nation. They all declared that such declarations do not protect us. Such declaration put our men and women serving in overseas in harm's way, under danger, under risk. Therefore, this kind of bigotry is of no value to this nation. It does not protect us. My faith is reaffirmed in the constitutional values of this country based on this. There is a purpose of not deciding such a policy decision based on the violation of the First Amendment, freedom of religion, freedom of faith, that no laws will be passed based on that. I not only have spoken against that, I have filed 2 briefs explaining to the courts on the Ninth Circuit and the Supreme Court as well, that why it is harmful to our nation, even for the security matters, that such distinction, strict security policy, yes, strict immigration policy, yes, but violating the Constitution, marginalizing a community, alienating a community, gives room to those who have malice about our country to find a corner to grow, to become more powerful. And this is what I said this is what I meant when I said we have immigration laws, but we don't have immigration policy. This is the difference. In immigration policy, and this nation never had immigration policy, this is what happens. In immigration policy, we estimate how many people are retiring this year, next 3 year, next 5 year, next 20 year. Who will be replacing them in the workforce so that the income to support their needs, their retirement is continuing. We do not have that. We do not have which sector will be needing how much manpower, how many people will be needed to support technology, how many people will be needed 5 year, 10 year, 20 years from now in farming, in agriculture, in industry, in manufacturing, in technology. We don't have that policy. That is why it is reported, and please consider this. There are 7 million, mostly young Americans, unemployed in this nation. There are 6.2 million vacancies in technology field that we cannot find enough trained people to fill. That is why this disparity of income exists, that these folks that are using that disparity to sow the division that, oh, immigrants are coming, they are taking over your jobs. Other nations are preparing people for the future, meaning they are training their young men and women to take technology jobs. That is why you see influx of people coming from outside the United States, because we don't have any immigration policy. We have not prepared. It's not that we lack resources. It is that some of these divisive folks among our nation have found this fear of immigrants as an easy target, easy way to exploit the sentiments of the community. And that is what they are doing. Instead of advising that we should train our young generation for the next 2 year, 3 year, 5 year, 10 year, so that we will fill all the vacancies that exist. Even today, as I said, 6.2 million vacancies. Ask any technology expert of this country, they will tell you there are not enough people trained in United States that will take those jobs. So the disparity exists that is being exploited by those who divide us based on that. That is an old script. First World War, second, they're not genius that they have come out with this economic disparity division, something new they have invented. Not at all. First World War, read the script of First World War, Second World War. 3 elements. 1, nationalism. 2nd, economic well-being. 3rd was fear of immigrants. Oh, these immigrants are coming, they will take over all of your jobs. Same script gave us First World War. Same script gave us Second World War. And same script is being repeated now. But this time, this is 2017, we are so codependent, we realize that this issue of economic well-being, fear of immigrants is a divisive issue. We have become so interdependent that we should learn about this, how to solve these problems, how to resolve them, so that the nation is stronger, so that this nation remains a beacon of hope for the rest of the world and remains strong based on our foundation, on our ideals, on our democracy. Look, the Brexit took place in Europe. I was invited to speak there. I spoke to them much early on when there was only hints of foreign intervention in the Brexit. Today, now they are investigating the influence of that foreign intervention in Brexit. They are regretting that this took place. Same thing is in the United States. We are discovering how our system of elections, how our system of government was maligned, was attacked, its integrity was attacked. So these elements, we are becoming more aware. We are becoming more aware that 7th, people ask me in every gathering, so what is the solution? The solution is this, as Virginia showed it on 7th of November. Stand up, speak for your values. Every American should participate in our electoral process. If we did that, our democracy will be stronger. Those who look towards us with malice in their hearts towards us will be defeated. We will remain. We just celebrated 230 years of our founding documents, of our Constitution. We have 230 more years to go and more to go, and we all remain in support of our values. We are direct beneficiaries. These dignities, I write in the book, that ask any person at the darkest corner of this earth who has never heard of America, who has never heard of these values that are enshrined in our founding documents, meaning what? Meaning this: do you want to have freedom to speak? The person will say yes. Do you want to have freedom to practice your faith or not have any faith? They will say yes. Do you want to have freedom to protest or speak? They will say yes, without realizing that we all are guaranteed those values. These values are worth fighting for, standing for, making sure that no one with the malice in their heart ever lays a bad hand or bad eyes towards it. It is that mission that I continue to speak in the spirit of Captain Humayun Khan. He gave his life, and I repeat it because some people object to that why you are bringing his sacrifice to this conversation, this political conversation. No, this is not political conversation. It is the conversation in defense of the values that are enshrined in our Constitution, in the 3 blessed documents. This is the story of the goodness of this nation that has made this nation beacon of hope. I cite in the book the speech that I heard, and I stood up when Reagan reached the end of that speech where he says, I have dreamed of this nation as a shining city on hill that has walls around it, but that wall has doors in it. So anyone with courage, anyone with heart can enter those doors and become part of this blessed nation. So it is for that purpose that we continue to speak.
And I want to take it to a personal level. More about your personal experience. Obviously, you knew that speaking at the DNC was going to expose you and your family in a way that you hadn't experienced before, but it then evolved into some sort of feud with then-candidate Trump. How has it changed your life and the life of your family, and was it all worth it?
Yes, it was worth it many a times, many a times. Now that we have begun to consider that there comes, this is what we talked, Ghazala and I, that had it been worth, there are 2 choices, and again, it's Captain Humayun Khan's life comes into play. He had the choice. He could have simply, like he ordered his men to hit the ground, he could have hit the ground. But that would have caused this suicide bomber to hit the wall, and on the other side of the wall there were scores of American soldiers that had just had breakfast and were getting ready to go to work next morning, that fateful morning. He had that choice. He could have ordered, his commanders are telling us that he could have ordered his men that were protecting the base to shoot that cab. But he must have thought that this may be an innocent person that has lost his way. So he gave his life in protection of others, in care of others. It is in that spirit that we say that we stood, we continue to speak regardless of attack. We have received thousands of wonderful mail, heartening mail from all over the country, people reminding us that Thank you for reminding us of our Constitution, of our values, of our goodness. We are grateful for that. But then there had been some ugliness as well. There had been some discouraging email. But look at the difference. And this is where the strength of this stand and this standing for fairness is so visible. Those who have written us ugly email, this is how we recognize it the moment we look at the envelope of that mail. They do not write return address on it. That speaks, that one doesn't know from the other, but they're all displaying the same cowardice. They do not realize that how it is so common because of the cowardice. On the other hand, we have people that have showered their love and their care and their courtesy. We have a letter from a retired Army nurse. 26 pages she writes. She served in Second World War in Germany. And on the 26th page, she writes to us after telling the whole story of her service in Europe prior to Second World War. And she said, Mr. and Mrs. Khan, continue to speak. Had more people spoken before Second World War, we could have avoided the atrocities that were committed in Second World War. We could have avoided the atrocities that were committed against our Jewish brothers and sisters in Second World War. Continue to speak. It is such letter, that 26th page means so very much to me that I will continue to speak.
There's so much more I want to ask you, but I want to open it up to the audience if there are questions from the audience members for Mr. Khan.
Yes. First of all, I would just like to say that nobody would take away from your son's sacrifice or from the grief any Gold Star family must feel when they lose a son. But once you put yourself out there as a political figure and as a very rabid critic of the president, or at the time candidate Trump, I think it opened you up. Like, you can't say you're above criticism. At that point, he had a right to defend himself. He had a right to say whatever he wanted to defend himself. Okay, that's the first point. But the second point was about the second question.
Okay, let's all be respectful and let him finish his question.
The Constitution does not provide. There's no constitutional right for people outside this country to enter the country. I hope you understand that. There's no constitutional right. So when you hold up the Constitution and say this is the Constitution, what Trump was saying is nothing contrary to the Constitution.
Okay, everyone, let's
our
be
primary
respectful and let him
primary
finish.
responsibility of any president is to protect this country. And if there's a group of people anywhere in the world, because of religious extremism or whatever, that pose a threat, he was saying, let's suspend, not ban, suspend suspend immigration until we have clear vetting and strong vetting procedures in place. But that was not the way it was covered in the press.
Let's give him a chance to respond. Let's give him a chance to respond to the question.
Stop streaming. I would be able to finish. You people are rude. You people are very rude.
Okay.
Please let him.
When you were all giving that standing ovation, it's not because you love him. It's because you hate Trump.
I'm sorry.
Admit it.
Can I interrupt you for
Let
a
him
second?
finish.
Can we let him answer the question?
I did not understand my brother's question, so I don't know what to say.
I think he was saying that. I'm trying to interpret. I think that he was saying the president had a right to argue back, and that he has a right to call for a suspension of a certain group of people who he believes are a threat to the United States. I think that was what I got from it.
Well, the president is entitled to his point of view. So are we. We are equal under the Constitution. We have equal right to criticize a candidate and criticize the president. And we were exercising, and we will continue to exercise our right of expression, and let the courts decide who's right, who's wrong. So,
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Thank you for being such a good human being and for inspiring all of us. And for standing up for immigrants and for the rule of law. There is a law in the books called temporary protected status, which, like all laws, the executive is supposed to follow. And right now, in the days before Thanksgiving, DHS has to decide whether it's going to respect that law under which 50,000 Haitians are protected because of the cholera epidemic and Hurricane Matthew and the earthquake. So we all should appreciate your reminders of the values that we're not a country that allows individuals to run amok over the law, but the executive has to obey it. Thanks for the reminders.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Mr. Khan. I understand you have fulfilled many dreams in your life, coming to the United States, going to Harvard. Is there any other dream you have yet to fulfill? Thank you.
My dream would be to see my nation become remain beacon of hope for the rest of the world. There is a report in the media and international media and all that instead of being number one on the prestige of the nations, we have slid to number 6 since last election. And I want to continue to see my nation become number one, not because of its military power or its economic power, no, because of its ideals, because of its principles, because of those principles being the beacon of hope for the rest of the world. Thank
you. Mr. Khan, I believe that there is a certain threat to our Constitution, which was expounded by the late Justice Scalia, which is that you have to interpret everything in its originalist idea as if nobody else could have any idea or way to interpret the Constitution. What do you think of Scalia's position?
No, I agree with the late Justice's interpretation and its point of view. It's a living document. We should always remember this, that all the changes that are taking place in our country, throughout the world, we must continue to deal with them. There is legislative process, there is constitutional process to incorporate those changes. Sometime when that argument is presented, it is limited to certain provisions of Bill of Rights, not all. If we need to be strict interpreting our constitutional values enshrined in our documents, then that should be for all provisions of the Constitution, not only certain provisions of the Constitution. So that is the only humble footnote I have, but I agree with Justice Scalia that Constitution should be read under its original sense. But then we are not living in 1776, 1784. We should be cognizant of that fact as well, and that we move forward to 2017. But I agree with him. Thank you. Yes.
You talk a lot about defending the Constitution. I wonder what your position is in terms of the United States' role in defending the Universal Declaration of Rights and the values that that enshrines and that I think also reflect American values.
Did you understand?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that one more time?
What's your position on how you see the U.S. defending the Universal Declaration of Human Rights?
Oh, yes, yes. Look, sometimes people begin to get this impression when I speak so passionately about my country, about its values, about its goodness, about its history, that somehow I'm saying that this is the perfect place on planet Earth. Not at all. This is not perfect place. There is so much room to make things better. There is so much more to move forward with. But this is the best place. This is the best place. Compare it with the rest of the world and you will come to this conclusion that there is no other nation as United States of America. Declaration of Human Rights, International Declaration of Human Rights, so much more needs to be done. We are falling behind because of the current circumstances. We are falling behind on those commitments that we have made to the rest of the world. We are absent from the table, from the world table where we used to sit. We are absent now from there. That is putting us behind. Instead of moving forward, we are retracting, and that concerns me. But I agree that we have so much we have so much further to go to move our nation forward.
Assalamu alaikum, Khizr Khan Sahib. Thank you so much. May God bless you and your family for the sacrifice. As an expatriate of Pakistan, I can vouch what you said about the Constitution and when it is violated. As a member of Ahmadiyya Muslim community, we have no rights in Pakistan to vote, and the Parliament of Pakistan has declared Ahmadis as non-Muslims, which they have no right to do. And that is something I share with Americans, my friends in America, that the Constitution, as you are saying, is absolutely a sacred document. This protects not only Ahmadis are thriving in the world, but Pakistan, on the other hand, has taken a spiral, a nosedive since they declared Ahmadis as non-Muslims. So I agree with that 100%. My question to you is, although it might be irrelevant to American audience, if they're given any opportunity and chance to speak to authorities in Pakistan, would you be able to convince them to give Ahmadi Muslims equal rights? Thank you so much, sir.
Let me, don't go anywhere. Let me answer this question right away. I wish you would have read the book. I address that issue, that none of us, Muslim to Muslim, none of us has any right to declare other person out of their claimed faith, period. We are all of equal dignity. This is between one person of faith and the faith that he or she practices. I have no right to declare somebody out of this faith or in this faith. I condemn the violence that Muslims are committing throughout the world. I condemn that violence, but I still do not give myself that right. Oh, they are not Muslims. I am the one that is Muslim. Not at all. That is not in my faith at all. I hope that answers your question, that you and I, everyone is of equal dignity, of equal respect, of equal in the eyes of our Creator. I share quickly a story of Attar. It's another Persian wise man. He narrates that a person in a place of worship was worshiping idol and was worshiping idols. So God orders that angel Gabriel to go and grant all of his prayers. So Gabriel goes to this place of worship where this person was worshiping an idol and goes back to the presence of God and says, God, he's not worshiping you, he's worshiping the idol. How are you granting his prayers? And this is what God says, and that is where the answer to your question also lies. He said, I know this, but I am answering his sincerity of prayer. Go answer all of his prayer. He's praying so sincerely, even though he's praying to an idol. So it is that, it's matter of divine decisions and all that. We all are of equal dignity, equal respect, equal character. So.
Thank you, sir. God bless you. Shukriya.
Thank you. Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum. First, I wanted to thank you so much as a Muslim American for all that you've done for the Muslim American community and representing us in such a good way, and that means a lot to me. My question is, when exactly, or like what exactly pushed your son, Captain Humayun Khan, to join the armed forces?
It's not too complicated. When he made the decision to join the ROTC program and then to take the commission, we asked him, what his motives are, and he said, look, whenever I am with the members of the ROTC, they are so honorable, they are so committed, they are so hardworking. I feel that I am in element with them. Now, you tell me that if a grown-up child of a person says that I want to join army or I want to join armed forces for these honorable goals and aims, how could you refuse? How could you decline? How could you discourage them? So we gave him our blessing, but his statement to us was, which heartens us, that I feel I am in my element with this honor, with this dignity, with this service to others, service to our nation. And so under those circumstances, we readily agreed with him.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Khan, on behalf of Miami Book Fair, on behalf of Miami-Dade College, and everyone here, and Ms. Shabazz as well. Thank you for gracing us with your presence and with your inspiration. Thank you.
Thank you very much.